This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
So my name is Michaela. I'm the founder of GC Prep and the co-owner. I co-own it with Janelle, who's the assistant program director at Sarah Lawrence, or one of them. They have multiple program directors and multiple assistant directors. And we went live with our services a year ago in September. And the whole reason we created GC Prep was because this process of applying is so stressful and so competitive, and there really aren't any guideposts for you guys to follow as you're trying to go through this journey. So how are you supposed to know how to be successful if there's no real guidance for you? Like, that's frustrating. That's not how it should be. And so that's why I created GC Prep. It started with all our educational videos, which there's about 24 hours worth of videos that are all designed to like help you understand the field, help you understand, whoops, someone's not quite muted yet. There we go. To help you understand the field so that you can show that you know what you're talking about and you know what you're getting into. There's a module all on application help, like how to write this statement, what to do with your CV, how to approach your interviews, how to describe your crisis experience. And then about 11 hours just of counselor interviews. So you can see me and counselors of different specialties and ages and backgrounds kind of getting into the nitty gritty of their jobs, what they like about it and don't like about it. And what I hope is a really unfiltered way that I don't think we see a lot in the genetic counseling community, this like behind the scenes, what's really going down type way. Those videos, if you are of an underrepresented group, so that's an LGBTQIA or a racial minority or someone in a like low socioeconomic background, those videos are free. There's a demographic survey on our website under the financial aid tab that you can fill out, and typically you're given access within about 24 hours. And we have a whole bunch of other services, from small groups to one-on-one coaching to longer term mentorship that is really designed to help you along this path and address this anxiety that is really a barrier to you guys doing your best work. So this webinar tonight, we really want to give you the tools and help lay out a structure for you guys to follow and to start brainstorming and like shift your view of how you are approaching your statement of purpose so that you can come at it from a way that admissions wants, right? And like Jessica's going to get into the details here, but the spoiler alert is like they don't really care what you've done, they care what you've learned from it and how it affected you and how it changed you. So that is kind of the main theme when you're going through your paper. And so as we go through this, I want you guys to reflect on the experiences you've had, whether it's shadowing or crisis or just like your personal life stuff that comes up, and think about what of those things made you who you are? What of those things changed how you view the world? Because those experiences and how you describe them are going to be of most value to you. So I'm going to turn the time over to Jessica here. She is one of our genetic counseling and life coaches, and I'll let her do a little bio on herself since she's amazing. But I will be here kind of monitoring the chat. So if you have a question in real time, go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll do my best to answer it. We will try to do a Q&A at the end, and I will moderate that as well. But I'm always available to you guys at our email address, which is support@gcprepllc.com. That comes directly to me. I answer those emails, and that's available to you. Okay. So Jessica, tell us a little about yourself and take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that was a really good introduction to just about reflecting and thinking of your own lived experiences that you've had that make you unique, but also like what motivates you to want to be in the field of genetic counseling. And Michaela mentioned this a little bit earlier, but like staying true to like your authentic self is going to just be really important throughout this entire process. And it's something that I'm extremely passionate about, which is why I'm here and I'm working with GC Prep as a coach. But in general, a little bit about my background is I've been in the field for 9+ years. I actually started out as a clinical assistant, working more on the industry side of things, and was getting more experience because I also am was a re-applicant, so I had to gain a little bit more experience after my first run, which I know is just such an arduous process, and then going back through it again was even more challenging. So I kind of started, as Michaela said, like reframing the way that I was approaching the next application cycle that I had. But I've been in the space anywhere from clinical marketing, I've done counseling, I've done community outreach, I've worked in nonprofit and patient advocacy. And again, I'm here today having a lot of experience with supervision, mentorship, program development, and being on the interview boards for some of the programs to kind of help you guys through this process and help guide you. And I'm really excited to be a part of it today. And help you have tools and resources to use while writing your personal statement, because there's just so much experience that you all have, I'm sure, that you just want to explain and share. And it's kind of like, where do we begin? How do we start? So just a little bit of an outline of what we're going to review today. We did introductions already. I would love to be able to meet all of you, but we don't have the time for introductions for everybody, but we will be going over just kind of basic definitions, CV, resume versus what a personal statement is. We'll kind of dive into personal statement 101, and we'll talk about do's and don'ts. And then we'll be going and participating in an exercise to kind of engage you and get your mind thinking from a different perspective, and kind of tying back to what I was talking about earlier of tuning into your authentic self and who you are and what you have to offer. All right, so basic definition of CV, resume, and personal statement. A CV is pretty much, it's curriculum vitae. It's your full history of your academic and professional experiences and credentials. And then a resume is something that's a little bit more concise. It's a picture of your skill sets and your qualifications and your job responsibilities. That's typically around 2 to 3 pages. Page length varies, but the curriculum vitae tends to be quite extensive, and the resume is a little bit more of a snapshot. In terms of genetic counseling and them asking for a CV resume, I would say that all the experience that you have is very applicable and valuable for the most part, but you don't want to have anything that's 20 pages for your curriculum vitae, but nothing too small to where it's only 1 or 2 pages for your resume. So just find an area that's kind of like a happy medium between both. Excuse me. The personal statement or statement of purpose, they're typically they interchange the words, but most of the time, the general overview of a personal statement, a statement of purpose, is asking who you are, what your academic and your professional interests are, and how you're going to actually add value to a graduate program. And that's just the general definition. So what does this mean for genetic counseling graduate school? Well, first and foremost, you're always wanting to look at the prompts, right? But generally, they're going to have similar expectations of what they want you to portray in your personal statement or statement of purpose. And that entails, what are your motivations for pursuing the field? What experiences have you had that has prepared you for the field? And that can be either personal or professional. So there might be life challenges that you have experienced that you can speak to, or even professionally, if you have specific job roles that have been preparing you, or if you have had experiences in advocacy, in volunteer work. These are all things that you can share and explain to them how that's prepared you to become a genetic counselor. What are your research interests? If you have any at all, you might not, and that's okay. What and why is XYZ program a good fit for you? So they want to know, why are you approaching them to be in their program? What value are you going to add to their program and to help pursue and evolve the field of genetic counseling? And then also, what are your future endeavors? What are you looking forward to about being a genetic counselor in the field? The field is just rapidly evolving all the time, and there's so many different niches and areas that you can go into, and they want to know, what is it? What interests you? Obviously, they're not going to expect you to have an exact plan of where you want to go, but having a general idea and a sense gives them an idea and lets them know that you are serious and committed to this field and wanting to expand it. So again, always refer back to the prompts when you get stuck or you have questions, and you want to make sure that you're answering those specifically. And this is really your chance in your personal statement to tell your personal journey, highlight your unique experiences and characteristics, and actually make a statement about why you want to be a genetic counselor. That's why those words are in there: personal statement, statement of purpose. You are sharing your personal journey and making a statement as to why you would be a great fit for a genetic counselor. So we'll start out with statement of purpose 101. Where do we begin? And as Michaela was mentioning earlier, it can be quite an overwhelming process, and it seems very daunting. And Jane, you had even mentioned this earlier too. It's just, where do I start? There's just so much that I want to explain and share, and I just don't know where to begin. So starting out, just brainstorming. I like to say this is kind of like your opportunity to just word vomit and just go and just share stuff that is relevant to your journey of wanting to pursue genetic counseling. And so I have listed out here just some points of reference that you can use when you go about doing this brainstorming data collection. And again, in my words, is just kind of like this word vomit. You can type it out, you can write it out. Some people even use recording to just talk it out, which is always really helpful. So it just depends on what works best for you. But when we're brainstorming, we want to just kind of first identify experiences that are truly impactful and have inspired you to want to pursue a career in genetic counseling. I'd mentioned this earlier, and this can be personal or professional, but what of your lived experiences makes you unique, but B, what have you taken from those experiences, and why has that pursued you and motivated you to even explore more about genetic counseling and wanting to pursue the career? Stop and ask yourself, what did you learn from this experience? What insights did you gain? Have you gained any skills from this? Have you learned of anything new? How is this relevant to genetic counseling? Because I will say that not all the time are your experiences going to be directly related to genetics or genetic counseling, and that's okay. But of that experience, how does it relate to genetic counseling and the profession, and what you learn from it, and how you can add to that skill set? And then also be thinking about ways that you can use these skill sets in the future as a genetic counselor. And then in this area too, when you're brainstorming, this is a good place that if you do have any direct genetic counseling experiences or counseling experiences in general, i.e. the GCA positions, crisis counseling, research, advocacy, etc., really just kind of go into detail on those. Again, maybe trying to identify one or two really powerful experiences that you've had that has really changed your perspective or your motivations for wanting to pursue genetic counseling. Another helpful thing that you can do in this brainstorming data collection area is identify and define your strengths, your weaknesses, and your values. These can be really important when you're writing your resume, your personal statement, and even through interviews. When you're able to kind of identify them and articulate them, you're able to speak a lot more confidently on behalf of them. So take some time to do some self-reflection. You can get personal feedback from other people, whether that be your family members, maybe your direct manager at work, or even genetic counselors that you're shadowing, that you know. You want to make sure that you actually know them close enough and personally for them to be able to kind of speak on your behalf of what different strengths and weaknesses you might have. But again, make sure that you do know them to a certain degree in a more personal level. And then there's also tools and assessments that are out there that you can use to help identify strengths and weaknesses that we can, that you can dive into and Google online. One of them, I'll just give a little clue to, it's the Gallup Strengths Finders, is a great tool to be able to help define and identify strengths that you have that, again, you can kind of sprinkle throughout your resume, your personal statement, and even use through interviews. An additional thing to do when you're brainstorming is think about your future career goals. I know I kind of talked about this a little bit before when you're talking about your experiences, but just getting it all out on paper is just is really, really helpful just to have it there. So, is there a certain specialty that's of interest to you? Michaela had mentioned some of our modules at GC Prep that we have that kind of go through the different specialties. So if you don't have particular experiences or exposure to those would be a great resource to use to kind of learn what different options you may or may not have when it comes to working in the field of genetic counseling. Are you interested in research? Do you want to work in a laboratory versus clinic? These are all things that, again, just starting to think about them and where you might see yourself based off of your experiences or things that you've learned through your experiences. Again, GC Prep also has counselor interviews, so you get the opportunity to learn about the different types of niche environments that genetic counselors can work in, or even just general job opportunities, because again, there's just so many different facets of genetic counseling and the skills that you learn in school that you can apply to all these different types of jobs. Do you want to go into precision medicine, pharmacogenomics, maybe teaching something that's of interest to you? So getting these thoughts out onto paper and helping kind of give you direction is helpful, because that's what they want to know and what they want you to express also in your personal statements. Another good tool to use or action item for brainstorming is just talking about your GC story. How did you find out about genetic counseling? What are your passions in the field? What do you find most appealing? Maybe there's also something that you are recognizing that is not the most appealing, and there's a disparity there, a gap that you want to fill. And what qualities do you have that embody somewhat of what a genetic counselor, the qualities that also a genetic counselor has? So just kind of starting to think about these things and getting them down on paper, again, is just helpful. Program details. So another part of the personal statement is we want to highlight the program and why you feel like that program is a good fit for you. And so start thinking of things as you're going through this process of what draws you to the programs. Are there specialty rotations that they have that might be of an area of interest to you? Maybe there's unique coursework that the school has. Some have fellowship and leadership opportunities that may be of interest to you. Maybe some clinical sites have different populations and there's a lot of diversity in there if that's something that's of interest to you. Class size, even mentorship throughout the program, because grad school is thinking hard, and it's always nice to have somebody to mentor you and guide you through the program. So that's always something too to just kind of think about with schools, is what does their mentorship and their leadership look like, and how do they best support you? Because just as much as they are interviewing you, you are also interviewing them. And I know that you just want to get into school and there's a little bit of desperation at some point, but you really do want to make sure that these schools are a really good fit for you, because you're spending a lot of your time and your money going there, and you want to make sure that it's somewhere that you will thrive and not be miserable. So keep these things in mind when you're writing these personal statements and when you're looking at these different programs, and stay true to who you are and what will be best for you, because it's 2 years and that's a long time. All right, so that was just kind of the summary of brainstorming, word vomit, just getting it all down on paper So now you have content to be able to pull from as you're writing your personal statement. And this next section, we're going to kind of go over a general outline of how you can structure your personal statement or statement of purpose. So if any of you have watched some of the modules, we have some really good ones that go a lot more into detail and expanding on some of these topics, especially with the experiences that you want to expand upon. And then also with the CV and resume, I know that's going back to what we talked about earlier, but we have a lot of modules that really dive a little bit more into detail on this kind of stuff and give really good examples to use. However, a general framework, if you are lost and just need some sort of structure, it's always, rule of thumb is really great to start out with a hook. Having a story or something that draws the reader in is really intriguing to read as somebody that's interviewing candidates or reviewing applications. Excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse. So having a personal experience, not even a personal experience, just some sort of hook that will draw the reader in and ties to kind of maybe what your inspiration is about wanting to become a genetic counselor, but make sure that the hook relates to your pursuit of genetic counseling. And then to follow, you have your body paragraphs, and that's a way for you to kind of expand upon those experiences that you identified in your brainstorming activity. And with those experiences, a good rule of thumb is maybe 3 or 4. You have a word limit, and that's the hard thing about all of this is you can't just say everything that you've done, and that's one thing that you don't want to do is regurgitate your resume. But in these experiences, stop and ask yourself again, what did you learn? What insights did you gain? How is that relevant to genetic counseling? And how can you or will you apply this insight in the future? Also, how did that get you to the next step of your journey of wanting to learn more about genetic counseling? I see it as kind of like a very chronological journey of what in the hook, kind of what inspired, and then led to this experience, which led to this experience, which led to this experience, which is why I'm here now at your school to really fulfill my dream and desire of becoming a genetic counselor. And so in this school area is where the brainstorming comes in with what you've done already, picking out and identifying why that school, why is that a good fit? And you're able to share that there. And then a conclusion or a summary. And Michaela and I talked about this earlier. The conclusion and summary, it doesn't necessarily have to be its own paragraph. You can kind of integrate this and tie this into the why school, and even use the school as, the final statement of, and I want to pursue my degree in genetic counseling with your school, or I see myself becoming, a student at your training program to exemplify my goals of becoming a genetic counselor. And then also, just with the outline, again, this is a general framework, but always be sure to answer and look at the prompts, because it might split up the prompts. You might have 3 different prompts for one particular school that's going to have you kind of piece apart this general framework. But a good rule of thumb is to always kind of have, I like to say, just like a master document. And for me, and this might not be helpful for everybody else, but if you have a general framework with all of this content in it, going through other prompts, I like to use the word, you can kind of Frankenstein and tailor it to each of the different prompts once you have all of the content written. Okay, so outside of the outline, there's a bunch of different ways that you can kind of approach writing your statement of purpose or your personal statement. And we talk about this in one of our modules, and again, go a lot more in detail on them with specific examples. However, there's different themes and approaches that you can take to writing your personal statement or statement of purpose. One of them that we discussed is strength focused. So you in this personal statement, you want to kind of highlight and exemplify what strengths you have and how that's going to help you succeed as a genetic counselor. You want to share these experiences that highlight those strengths, and then how you intend on, using that in pursuit of becoming a genetic counselor, or maybe how those relate to the program, because you want them to be able to also increase your strengths in those areas, make those a little bit stronger. And you want them to also complement your strengths. So, and then also, how have you applied them, and how do you intend on applying them as a genetic counselor in the field? Another theme that you can go kind of piggybacking opposite of what their strengths are is a weakness focus. Here you can really share your ability to overcome challenges. Again, those can be something that's maybe a personal challenge, maybe a health, personal health situation that you had. Maybe it was receiving bad news, but it could also be challenges at work. But make sure that they are related to genetics, genetic counseling, healthcare in general. But you tend to want to follow up with a lesson or growth learning that you had from this experience, and then kind of reframe that into a strength and maybe how you're going to use that in pursuit of your career of becoming a genetic counselor. Another theme that you could, an approach that you could take, is crisis and shadowing experiences, if applicable. Not everybody has that experience, and that's totally okay, but we like to have these options just to give you different opportunities to, again, express who you truly are and what feels right for you when you're writing your personal statement. So crisis and shadowing experiences, this is kind of your introspective narrative, again, coming back to this, what did you learn? What insights did you gain from this experience, is how this is going to be applied to you as a genetic counselor in the field. And then your personal journey, your GC journey, those are often ignited with some sort of like transformational or pivotal life event. And in this personal statement, as I kind of mentioned earlier, and this follows a little bit in suit with the structure that we used in the outline, but starting with a hook of that moment, what was your emotional reaction to that? How did that draw you and inspire you to want to learn and have a curiosity about the field of genetics or genetic counseling? And then how did this, how did this kind of inspire your journey? And then you go on to explain those experiences that you've had and why they are relevant to why you're sitting in front of the school interviewing with them or wanting to interview with them to pursue your career as a genetic counselor. So now we'll go over some just basic do's and don'ts of your statement of purpose, a personal statement. So don't ramble. Rambling is not good. And it's going to, and I will say this will happen on your first draft, and that's okay, because we will continue to refine as we go along, and you'll have to refine when you look at word count and word limits. So you will recognize where you're rambling, and identifying those areas. It's always helpful. Sometimes I like to, encourage people to ask yourself, are you saying this because you think that's what they want you to hear? Or are you saying this because this is actually something that you've learned? If it's something that, you think that they want to hear and you're talking about, and this goes into the next bullet point, to going too much with words, but if you're going too much into details about the case and the research and you're wanting to explain that you know what you're talking about in terms of variants of uncertain significance or clinical exome, you don't need that. That's fluff. You want to get down to the point of, again, what insights did you gain? What did you learn from this? And how are you going to take this moving forward? So those are easy ways to identify. If you think that it's fluff, read the sentence or the sentences and say, how can I summarize this? Or am I just saying this to say it? If it's necessary and makes sense, then keep it there. But if it's not and it doesn't add to the point of the experience, then take it out. Along those same lines, genetic counseling words, GC Prep also has a great module on just GC jargon, as we can say, just buzzwords and things to just keep in mind when you're writing your personal statements or you're looking into your resume. All of these things kind of pique the interest of those who are looking through your application. However, you don't want to go too much into just throwing all of these words out there, because it comes off as if you're trying to impress too much, and the person that's looking through the application can tell. And also, of those words, the buzzwords that you're using, make sure that you know what the words actually are, because if you get an interview and then they ask you to expand on that and you don't have an answer for them as to what it means when you were actively listening to XYZ patient, or they made an autonomous decision, you're not gonna do well in the interview. And though, again, that comes across in the interview of you not being authentic, and that's not something that they're looking for. So when you use these words, make sure that you know what they mean.
And just
don't regurgitate your.
Oh, sorry, I'm just going to jump in real quick. We have a whole video on all those GC words and explaining the definitions and how to use them. So I'm pretty sure that one's free. So you can go looking for that one on our website, because a couple are good, too many, no bueno.
Yep. Yeah, and another thing, so check out that module there, because it is really helpful. So don't regurgitate your resume. I mentioned this earlier. Often we fall into, what do they want to hear? Or I just want to tell them everything that I've done. Well, that's on your resume. The chance for the personal statement is your personal statement is your opportunity to, as we talked about earlier, go more in detail about who you are personally, your authentic self, and what truly has inspired you and motivated you, and things that you've learned about this field and why you want to be here. So do not regurgitate job responsibilities and all of these things that you've done, because that's on your resume. It's a great little snapshot. If they want to learn more about it, they will ask you it in the interviews. So use this opportunity again with your personal statement to really share those powerful moments and expand more on certain areas in your resume that you wouldn't often see just looking at it. And then to that point, though, don't get too detailed on personal experiences unless it really is related to your genetic counseling journey. But you want to have a fine line in between sharing too much and not sharing enough. Okay, so do's. Look at the prompts. Always refer back to the prompts. If you are getting lost and are questioning whether or not you're on the right track, read the prompts and get an idea of what the schools are looking for. Again, we talked about motivation, strengths, research interests, etc. And then be mindful of the word limit. And I know that's just it's so hard. It's so hard, but be mindful of that when you are going to tailor your master draft, if that's the way that you decide to do it, to these specific prompts. Also, look at things through the lens of a genetic counselor when you're refining or writing your application materials. Something that's always been really helpful, and I encourage people to do, is to look at a genetic counselor's job description in a clinic or even in an industry field role on the business side of things, to be able to see it written out and articulated in a different way will help starting to get your brain thinking like a genetic counselor. Also, going through all of our, again, materials that we have at GC Prep with the different interviews with genetic counselors and the modules on, the different specialties that they are involved with. Start thinking like a genetic counselor, and there's tools out there to help do that, especially through GC Prep. find ways to make connections to the schools that you're applying to. Again, this just kind of comes back to what can you use and leverage from your experiences and what you've learned, and make that connection to the school, because you want them to know that you've done your due diligence and looking at their school, and just as much as you're investing the time for your applications, like they're going to invest 2 years into training you. So they want to make sure that you really want to go to their school, and there might be other connections that you can make in terms of networking, that you can, have a little bit more insight and connection directly to those universities or the schools. The do also brainstorm and data, the word vomit that we talked about, I would just highly encourage that just in general. And then just be vulnerable and share your story. All of your experiences for each one of you has value. And I know it's hard not to fall into having a lot of insecurities about whether or not you have a research publication or you have direct counseling experiences. It doesn't matter what your experience is and whether or not it's directly related to genetics or genetic counseling. What is the most powerful is that it's an experience that has truly, genuinely, authentically affected you as a person and has inspired your path to wanting to become a genetic counselor. So share your story. This is your opportunity to really just be who you are and show that to the review committee, because they don't get the opportunity to see that on a CV or resume, but they get to see that and hear that in your personal statement. And so that kind of leads me to a values exercise that we are going to kind of jump into this next 15 minutes or so. But I want to just take a pause and give the opportunity for maybe, 5 minutes or so, Michaela. I don't see if there's any questions in the chat that came through that maybe we can address, or we can jump into the values exercise and then address them after. It's up to you.
So we had a couple that I responded to directly. So if you do have a question so far,
Okay.
Go ahead and put it in now, and I will just kind of recap the questions that have been asked because they were good. So the first one was, do we have to specify a specialty that we want to pursue in genetic counseling in our paper? And you don't have to, but I do recommend being more specific than I want to be a genetic counselor, because that's why we're all here, right? That's yes, we know. So I need something a little bit more specific than that. If you've done research in the past, for example, and you really want to continue doing research, then it's pretty easy to tie in that theme. I got my start in research. I really like that. I want to continue doing it. I'm not sure what aspect of genetic counseling I'll be in doing that research, but I want to contribute to the knowledge base, right? Or if you've just been super interested in pregnancy and how life works like that growing up, and you're really interested in being a prenatal counselor, let us know. So no one's going to hold you to that specialty that you mentioned in your paper. And I don't even really think you have to be super passionate about it, but let us know what interests you specifically about the field. And we do have videos on a ton of specialties. If you're I don't know, I'll worry about that when I get my seat in a program. Well, we kind of have to, we need to think about that a little bit earlier, just so you as an applicant look like you have a little bit more direction compared to others who might not incorporate something like that in the paper. So it doesn't really matter to me if you specifically state it. If you have the words, I want to be a prenatal counselor in your paper, that's not as important to me. But if you come across with I've worked with kids with disabilities in the past, I've really enjoyed that, I want to continue to work with kids with disabilities, right? That is a clear idea that admissions can have, where it's okay, so maybe pediatrics would be really interesting for you. Or I find I'm passionate about mental health and how genetics plays into that role. and psychiatric genetic counseling is of interest to me, right? And so you can kind of find something in your past that has kind of caught your specific interest, and just kind of make that a heavier focus of your paper, or at least bring that in. The other question that came up was how to talk about more abstract things, like how we apply skills or passions to a career in genetic counseling. And this person was struggling to know, like, how do I get across things like I'm good at communication, or like I'm empathetic? Because one of the things, when we do document reviews for people and they bring us their first draft, it's very common to see statements like I am empathetic, or like I am like a good communicator, and they just like come right out and like state the qualities that they have, which is fine, but it's way more powerful to demonstrate those qualities that you have by sharing an experience with us where you applied them, right? And when you share these experiences, I don't want to like watch it on TV. I don't want like experience it from like far back. I want to experience it from the perspective of your brain. So if you're having a thought, like tell me what that thought was. Tell me how you were feeling in that moment. If there was like panic of not knowing how to respond in that moment, I want to feel that panic, So involve the reader so they can feel what you felt in that moment, and then be like, this is how I responded, and this is what I said, and this is how that the other person took it, or made a good outcome of that. And even if it didn't go the way that you wanted it to, like let's say you did a bad job, right? That's still a learning experience. So you can still describe like, this is how I handled it, and when I was thinking about it later, I was like, oh yeah, that was wrong. This is what I should have done, and this is how I'm reflecting on it. So you don't have to be good necessarily at these skills yet. Like that's why you're going to school. But showing them that you're considering how to bring in these skills, how to talk to people, how to listen to what they're going through and meet them where they are, that is far more impactful than saying like, I'm an advocate. Like, yes, you are, but like, prove it.
Yeah.
Other questions? We'll have some at the end. Oh, there's one more here.
Yeah. Michaela, for the values exercise, it takes about 12 minutes. So I just want to be good on time for them to be able to bounce through it. And this is actually a really good segue and transition into this exercise. So those abstract ideas of passions and values, it can be really grounding for most people to just kind of identify and articulate your values, because not often do people know what their values are. And a lot of the time, whether or not, with most of the people that I've worked with, our values are very similar, all of us in genetic counseling. And so this exercise is really used to kind of like ground you and maybe give you some guidance as to where to start and how to articulate those abstract ideas. Because at the end, there's some homework that I'll leave you with actually kind of putting a verb to what these values are. And that will help you with kind of writing that. And then also thinking about ways of how those values relate to the genetic counseling profession, the program and career goals that you have. And so I cannot take credit for this values exercise in particular. It was something that I was trained in with my coaching, but this is direct. I'm going to drop this in the chat, and it's directly from Brene Brown. I am a fangirl. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Brene Brown, but she is a social science researcher. She does a lot of work in shame and guilt, but she also talks a lot about vulnerability and then also leadership as well. So this is like the perfect thing for these personal statements, right? And so with our values drive all of our motivations and our behaviors and why we do the things that we do. So again, putting words to them and articulating them is going to help you with writing, hopefully help you with writing your personal statement, and then also with interviews and just tuning into who you are authentically, because it's really important that we live consistently and congruently with our values throughout our lives. And that includes going to graduate school and figuring out which career path in the space of genetic counseling is the best for you and what schools are good for you. So all that to be said, I dropped the link in the chat. What I would like everybody to do at this point is open up that link, and there's a handful of values that are going to be listed. And it comes off as quite overwhelming, so don't get too overwhelmed. There's a lot of them. The first step is I want you to, I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock, and I'm going to let everybody, you can keep your cameras off. And I want everybody to identify all of the values that you connect with. Don't think too much about them. Just if you connect with them, I don't know if you want to write them down, check them off, highlight them on however you have it open. But I'm going to put three minutes on the clock and just connect with, just identify all the values that you connect with. And that can be anywhere from 15 to 25. Just identify with them and make note of them. So I'll put 3 minutes on the clock starting now. Okay, I think for sake of time and just making sure that we are all, if people have to leave early, I just want to make sure that we get through this exercise. So I'm going to stop the clock now. It's almost 3 minutes, but if we had time, I would ask, what that experience was like for you. So if you have an opportunity to just kind of like reflect on that personally, just ask yourself that after this. The next step is to now organize and group these values into how they relate to each other. So a lot of them are very similar, and you'll be like, oh, I don't know, but there's a common thread that you'll see for all of them, and you'll be able to start grouping them and organizing them in some sort of group. And an example for me would be one of my values is joy, but what falls under joy is traveling and community. And so take 3 minutes here. I'm going to actually put 2 minutes on the clock to start, again, organizing and grouping them. And as you're going through this process too, I want you to start noticing values that kind of stick out to you? Okay, time is up for that. So you should at this point have some sort of grouping of these different values that you've identified. And the third part of this is to take a minute or two to identify your top, I would say, 3 or 4 core values. And those tend to stay like really true to who we are. I would encourage you to think of words that you really identify with, or I like to say vibe with. You know, what speaks true to you when you see that word that kind of embodies and incorporates all of those other terms. Something that you would be able to speak naturally on of, yeah, this value of community for me is something that I really, really resonate with. What resonates with you out of those groups? Which of those values comes to mind when it's just, it flows and it feels right? And I'll give about a minute for this. It's a little rushed, and I don't want to rush people, so feel free to continue to expand on this and after the fact, and do a little bit of reflection on what they mean to you. And then once you've identified those top 3 or 4 core values, I'm going to put this in the chat, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. I want you to go ahead and I want you to, and this takes a little bit more time because you have to kind of think about it, but add a verb to each of these values that you've identified. It helps to put kind of an action behind what your value is. So for example, another one of my values is curiosity. So I like to lead with curiosity. So take some time. Again, this takes a little bit more, and I like to say this is kind of like the homework that I give everybody, but add a verb to each of these values. And then finally, think of ways and how they relate to the genetic counseling profession, the program, and your career goals, and how you plan on making a difference through these values, and what has gotten you, why these values have gotten you to where you're at today with sitting in front of these programs. So I hope this experience, I know it was a little rushed, and this exercise may help you with just kind of grounding and tuning into who you are and your authentic self, because as mentioned earlier, that's really what they want to see in this personal statement, what you've learned, insights you've gained, why you want to become a genetic counselor. And so, you know, utilizing this, living consistently and congruently, and expressing that with your values and expressing that through your personal statement in interviews is all very helpful to do. And just remember that you guys have a lot of unique experiences and value in all of those, regardless of whether or not they are related to genetic counseling. This is your chance again to share your personal journey and make a statement as to why you want to be a genetic counselor and pursue your master's in a particular program.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. And that I think was really helpful and a really good place for you guys to start with all this. And I enjoy the value activity. And this is something that with other people that we've been working with and kind of seen their progression as, we look over their papers and do these document reviews and, get them to a place where they have a paper that really resonates with them. It's because they have throughout their paper, they have stayed true to this common core, one or two values that by the time you get done with your paper, you leave it being like, wow, I know that Jessica really cares about this. And if they leave your paper thinking, I know that so-and-so really cares about this thing, that is a success, right? That's a success. So, we're at time. I'm not going to hold any of you guys here, but I did want to remain available for the next few minutes if anyone did have questions. I know there's a.
Oh, where'd she go? She went off. I think there was a question. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just said, are you there? I'm not sure where she went. I think she was saying, though, there was a question that was, I think, Stephanie, you would put that in there. Do you have any tips on transitions to new topics and experiences in your personal statement within the body portion? I am.
Sorry,
Michaela?
guys. I'm back.
Okay,
Apparently,
no
my computer was like, no, you're not. You are not going to be around. So I'm not going to share my screen here. Cancel. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Just let me get back on track. So Stephanie had a question. You haven't answered that one yet, Jessica, right?
Nope, I was just reading it out loud.
Okay, apologies. So Stephanie had a question about transitions, right? Between in the body of the paragraph, how do you switch between concepts and paragraphs? And there's a couple ways to do it, and it kind of depends on how you've focused your paper. So one easy way to do it is chronologically, right? So typically you start off with a hook, and that can be, usually it's something that brings you an experience that's oh, okay, tell me more about that. And then usually what I have people do is kind of back up and tell me how they got to the point. So there can be this chronological progression. So you kind of share an early experience and analyze that, and then next this happened, and share it. And so it's more chronological transitions. But other people can focus on the things that you've learned, or these strengths that would make you a good genetic counselor. It's more concept based. And so you kind of set that up towards the beginning of your paper, where you're I want to share these moments in my life that have really proven to me that this is the right field. So first, this happened and it showed me this value that I have, or this skill that I have. And then this other thing happened and that taught me this quality. And then this happened and that taught me this quality. So it's more you transition between qualities, and just use your transition statements to describe moving through those. And other times it can be, there's other ways to transition between these. If it's, if you share a story where you really did bad, you didn't do it right, and so you reflected on how you could have done it better, and then your next paragraph is describing when you did it better, right? And you kind of move through your growth in that way. Okay. We are, okay, so for you, Tori, are we still doing one-on-one meetings, absolutely, right? And so we have small groups, which are up to 6 applicants. They're usually less. Usually it's like 2 or 3. So it's a good time, especially if you feel like you're on the right track, but you just want to check in. So the small groups are really good at giving you some one-on-one time. Like we'll look at some stuff of yours personally, but we also spend time on the other people. So you get to hear feedback on yours and feedback on other people's, and you can learn stuff there as well. But we do individual sessions. And so you can book individual sessions on our website, and those are like one-time deals. But if you know that you want multiple sessions, like if you're like, I am really stuck and I want help getting started, and then I want you to look it over, and then I want you to look over my next draft and have multiple sessions like that, we do those as well. And in the recurrent mentorship tab, which Jessica just posted in there, there's something called limited series mentorship orientation. And that's a 15-minute session with me where we just kind of talk about like, where are you, what are you looking for, and what coaches are available and would be good for you, and pricing and stuff. You can see that all online as well. And that kind of gets you set up with like 3 to 6 sessions to go over all of that. So we do those limited series both for document review, and then we open them up again kind of mid-January or so for mock interviews. For other people, you might want like a more holistic guidance, right? Because like document reviews, we're really focused on how to get your CV and your essays into a place that's like super dope, right? That really represents you, and that is going to get you an interview. But if you're looking for something more like, I'm really struggling with anxiety, or I'm really having PTSD from last time, or I'm really just like unsettled about this, and you want more like coaching and mentorship and like more tools to kind of guide you through the process, then Jessica and one of our other coaches, Jessa, are certified life coaches, and they have more tools like this value activity that they can give you to help you move through that. And yes, they can review your documents. Yes, they can help you with application, but they have additional skills that, like myself, I'm not a certified life coach. I don't have those tools. So I can do really well helping you with document review, but if you're looking for something broader and more like defined and structured, then one of our life coaches could be really helpful for that. And they do, 4 sessions, like a month, up to 6 months of coaching agreements. And so we can have a meeting to talk about that as well before you commit to anything. Other questions? And again, if you thought this webinar was helpful and had helpful information, then again, I direct you to our video, because the content of this webinar was kind of excerpts from our Writing Your Statement of Purpose video, which is like 45 minutes just on those details. And we have a whole separate video on your CV and all these other things that'll really help you. And those videos are really designed to take you from like 0 to 65 to 70% of everything you need to know. And then the other 30 to 35% is stuff that's like really specific to you, and it would need to be in a live session, either a small group or a one-to-one. Another question here, how do you find or make a good hook? Yeah, so usually it's like a dramatic story. There's a little bit of theater. I'm going to be honest, there's a little bit of theater that goes at the beginning of these like personal statements. And this hook does not at all have to be related to healthcare or genetic counseling. It really, like, these moments for me, like, that make a good hook are ones that are either a little like startling, or like where the person had like a big epiphany, or something. Like last year, one of the people I coached for document review was a non-white applicant, and we figured out the hook for her is in her previous professional experience. She was trying to help a student who came into her office, and her bag had like a swastika on it or a I think it was a Confederate flag, so some type of like racist symbolism right on her purse. And that made this applicant like very uncomfortable because she didn't know like what's going to come out of this person's mouth. Are they going to be aggressive towards me? Do they know what it means? And so it kind of like threw her for a loop. But that was just a moment in time of her life where immediately it makes for a good story, right? Like the opening line is like, I was staring at a racist symbol, or like I was staring at this like Confederate flag, or like racism was confronting me, right? And immediately as a reader, you're like, what happened? Tell me now, right? And you kind of get involved. And then she had an opportunity to show us how she got over that mental like crisis that was going on in her head, and then was still able to help that person. So those kind of stories can be really helpful. And so you can think about in your personal life with your family, like were you helping a friend or a loved one through a crisis, or in your shadowing or your crisis counseling, did you have a patient that really just kind of stumped you, or you didn't know what to do, or like their lived experience just like hit you really hard, or a time when you felt super just like off kilter for some reason. Those kind of stories make good hooks when they're told from the perspective of in your head, right? I want to see it through your eyes.
Yeah. And I can add to that too. Those are great, personal experiences, a story from an experience or exposure that you've had, whether it be in shadowing or on the job, professional experiences, volunteering. Sometimes things that can be helpful, even just a quote, right? Something that opens up, for the reader to just think like, oh, what's next? Like they're opening up with a picture is worth 1,000 words and blah, blah, blah. That's a very cliche quote, but maybe opening up with some sort of quote that relates to your journey and your story, or even using those values and just talking about how you are, something about compassion and being a compassionate person, and that leading to your journey. So just wanted to add those two things, that if you don't find a actual lived experience, like maybe using a quote again, or your values as something that you can kind of hook people into drawing them in.
Yeah. But you know what? Everyone has something. Everyone's got something that they can use. That's been like a common theme as we've been coaching people. You all have something that can be turned into a hook, I promise you. And so if that is something that you're struggling with, then a coaching session, we can dive into that and be like, all right, tell me about this, tell me a story like this, and we can help you kind of tease out, yes, this story can be analyzed in a way that's helpful, or like the story that you're using is probably not having as much impact as you really want, so let's think of something else. We can kind of guide you through that process. But I promise you, every single one of you has had an experience that can be used as a hook.
You do. Absolutely.
Other questions?
All of your experiences are all valuable.
Does the hook have to be put at the beginning? I recommend it. I do recommend putting it at the beginning.
That's it.
Yeah, because that is really where it's going to pull them in. Because think about this. Even if the school you're applying to has like 20 seats, which is like a lot for a genetic counseling school, they're going to get a lot of applications. Boston University got 400 applications last year. 400. So their admissions team had to divide that up, and like each person was reading dozens of papers. And usually, they take a couple hours at a time to read papers. So you need to have something right at the beginning that like refocuses them, because they're human too. So once you're like reading and reading and reading hours of people saying like kind of the same things, then you need to have something at the beginning that like demands their attention back. and makes them excited to finish your paper, and like not having it be as necessarily expected as other applicants who are not starting out with a hook. So yes, I would put that at the beginning.
Engaging, something that's engaging and going to draw them in.
Yeah.
Wanting them to know more to get to the end of your personal statement. And then you leave it there too with, I want to be here. And you want to learn more about me after reading my personal
You're curious.
statement. So you're going to invite me to an interview, and that's how it works.
Yeah. And we had kind of a smaller N size last year because I hadn't thought of the idea of these like limited series at like document time last year. So our N was smaller, but everyone who did a document review last year, 100% got an interview. And so we can compare that to approximately 50% of applicants that apply would be interviewed. So with document review, we can certainly increase your odds of getting an interview at that point. Okay. So again, I'm always available, support at gcprepllc.com. There's a ton of resources on our website. There's calendars of our events and our small groups and our services. We've got free book clubs. We'll probably do another free webinar like this about getting ready for interviews. That'll probably be end of January-ish. So be on the lookout for that. But we're available, and you don't have to do this alone. The anxiety that you're feeling is normal, but it's not required, right? And so we can help you with that, and we can help make this a more tolerable experience and get you through this process. So thank you guys so much for coming.
I was going to say, we have our support group too with the reapplicants, anybody. So you're not alone. Reapplicants are not alone either. And the first one will be held on next Monday on the 14th. So
absolutely. That's free. Definitely join it. It's going to be each month. So thank you guys so much for your time. Thanks for sticking around, even though we went a little bit late. This will, of course, has been recorded, so we'll post it to our website in the next day or two, and also on YouTube, so it'll have subtitles. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Bye.